All right, AP students, welcome back. We got part two of our lesson here. And we're pivoting from Russia, a massive, growing political state in the Northern Hemisphere, to the United States of America, another massive, growing political state in the Northern Hemisphere, just on the other side of the world. And I'd say the United States is having, all things considered, a little better go of it in the 19th century, although still with some major growing pains and bumps and jostles and difficulties along the way. But in the end, the United States is not moving toward the path of instability and revolution. Instead, it's becoming a kind of a global economic colossus. And so that's what we're going to look at here in the shorter second half. So the target, I can contextualize the American story within the broader patterns of world history. Some of these bits and moments of the American story, are geographic expansion, the Civil War. You even see the pointedly chosen image of African American soldiers during the Civil War, part of what we experienced there, and how does that fit in globally? Images of the United States fighting against Native Americans, indigenous people, and how does that fit in with the global broader pattern? And just sort of this growing economic life marked by industrialism and consumerism and products we all know and love, like Coca-Cola or Diet Mountain Dew, somewhat less famous, but lower in calories. Okay, so if the first half of the United States' history is about anything, it's about expansion, it's about growth. And Americans like to think about ourselves as having our own story that's kind of uniquely our own and unencumbered by the past and sort of different from the rest of the world. But when you study world history, you sort of recognize a lot of the chapters in our story, a lot of the things that we experienced harmonize or resonate more broadly. So yeah, lots of places were expanding. We didn't call it imperialism when we did it. We just called it expansion. We just sort of said, well, we should expand all the way to the Pacific because, no one's there except for, some Mexicans and some Native Americans. But basically, no one's there. So yeah, Manifest Destiny is a somewhat fraught idea. The idea being it was God's will. It was plain that it was God's will that America should expand and spread its way of life from sea to shining sea. And like we see in this illustration, the Providence or Lady Liberty is going to spread and bring telegraph cables along with her. How about that in the book of the law? And as she's spreading from right to left or from east to west, as it were, she's bringing with her railroads and stagecoaches and farmers and telling all these Native Americans and these buffalo, shoo, get on out of here, right? And so that's kind of the story of Manifest Destiny. And all this territory, all this land, between the Mississippi and the Pacific is scooped up piece by piece, a lot of it from Mexico, or Britain, up in like Washington and Oregon, that sort of places. And there's going to be conflict along the way. Interestingly, one of the conflicts that gets created by Manifest Destiny is an internal conflict. Manifest Destiny and the constant acquisition of land for the United States exacerbated the central tension or dysfunction in the American political system and the American identity that related to slavery. If we're going to proclaim Enlightenment ideals and say that we hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, that they are endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights, then how can that coexist with slavery? That's a poor fit right from the very beginning. It's like slavery is like a rock in the boot of the American system. It just doesn't fit. It causes agitation. And the constant expansion brings up the question of, will this new territory be slave territory or free territory? And how can we keep a fair balance between slave and free territories in America's political system? So it's like an argument that's never really fully allowed to resolve. And instead, it just sort of agitates the American political system and makes us very, very sick until it finally comes to a head in the American Civil War. And the best thing you can say about the Civil War is that the United States prevailed in it against the slaveholding forces of the Confederate States of America and ensured the future of a country free from slavery, if not quite free from racial discrimination. We'll be working our way toward that goal, but free from slavery at the very least. And so that's good. What's bad about it is 700,000 people, Americans, die at the hands of other Americans, and it provides a glimpse into what happens when two industrialized nations go to war against each other, and it's some horrific stuff. And the rest of the world says, maybe let's not do that, until they forget that lesson and jump into World War I. As the United States is expanding further west, we run into conflict with the indigenous peoples, all the various Native American tribes of North America. Now, we've been kind of kicking the can down the road for in many ways. You know, for the first half of American history, our Indian policy was basically, why don't you move west to the Mississippi and we'll be happier and you'll be happier and we'll just stay out of each other's hair. Well, manifest destiny just keeps needing to eat. It keeps needing to grow. So now Americans are moving west to the Mississippi and we find ourselves in conflict yet again. And we try to resolve that with like a reservation policy. And maybe you know some things about the reservation policy whereby tribes were sort of told you can't stay where in your traditional lands or your traditional hunting grounds. You have to stay on these smaller reservations and we'll pay you to stay there. And on those lands, it's not enough land where you can really follow your traditional way of life. And the buffalo are all dying anyway because we're killing them. So, you know, your way of life is gone. And so these reservations are not happy places. And then instead they're kind of little powder keg places. And tensions and resentments would fester and brew. And sometimes the United States wasn't holding up its end of the deal, you know, by being late with annuity payments. And so every now and again, this would blow up into violence. And usually the violence ends in the way violence typically ended when an industrialized nation fought indigenous peoples from a non-industrialized society, which is the industrialized nation wins. That's how that almost always works in world history. The Battle of Little Bighorn is the exception to the rule. Fought in the Badlands areas of Montana and South Dakota. This is the last great moment of military heroics for the Plains Indians against the United States Army. Suffice to say, the Plains Indians know full well they're not going to win this war. And they didn't. They are sidelined to make way for farmers and railroads and industry and, you know, resource development. Because the United States is on the way to becoming an economic giant, the economic colossus on the planet, and in a way that it never really quite relinquishes. It's a stunning thing, the thing that happens with the Industrial Revolution. We've looked at this before. But what's really noteworthy to note is that the Industrial Revolution benefits all economies, but no economy benefits more than the United States. And again, you just say, why the US? Well, the US has the resources. You know, that's where we had an advantage over Great Britain. Britain didn't have the resources. They had to colonize to get the resources. We had the resources in our own backyard, at least once we expanded. We got the labor pool, immigration's pouring in, all the kind of cultural, legal receptivity toward the idea of competition, property rights, rugged individualism. These are ideas found in American culture. And so the industrial, by the time we're in the second half of the 19th century, the second industrial revolution, no place experiences that like the United States. No place is primed for it like the United States. And by 1900, the end of period 3, the United States it's like I said, it's an economic colossus in its own category. And so there's been some fraught periods with that expansion, but there we are at the end of it. We'll study more about that stuff next time. In the meantime, there is a viewing check that goes with parts 1 and 2 of this lesson, so good luck on that. And yeah, I hope you guys have a great day. See ya.